The sky above Chicago looked like it had been carved from steel, cold, clean, merciless. The city was just waking up, steam curling from vents, coffee cups in gloved hands, commuters moving like small particles of purpose. I stood on the sidewalk outside the tower I had built, the one I used to call mine, and watched a crane lift golden letters toward the top of the glass facade. D-O-N-O-V-A-N. Each clang of metal struck through me like a bell tolling. For a funeral I hadn't agreed to attend. 5 letters, 1 name, my father's name. The crane operator didn't see me, didn't know that every flash of gold was hammering a scar into something sacred. "Looks good up there," someone said behind me, a man in a hard hat admiring his own work. I wanted to tell him that what he was raising wasn't a logo, it was a gravestone. But instead, I stood still and whispered under my breath, "Not for long." That tower had been my life for 10 years. Every late night, every risk, every win, and every breakdown had been poured into that building. And now it bore the name of the man who once gambled away our rent money. My name is Camille Donovan, and this is what it feels like to watch your legacy stolen by blood. I didn't grow up in towers or glass offices. I grew up in a small apartment over a mechanic's shop on the south side, the kind of place where the floorboards creaked like they were complaining about your existence. My father, William Donovan, called himself a visionary. What that meant, in our neighborhood, was that he had ideas nobody would pay him for. He played cards at the corner bar and came home smelling of gin and gasoline. He'd kiss my forehead and call me kiddo, like that erased the shouting that came before. My mother, Lydia, was the quiet one. She used to hum while cooking cheap pasta, stretching 1 can of sauce for 3 nights. Sometimes she'd look at me with this soft sadness, as if she already knew she couldn't protect me from the man she'd married. When I was 10, she started saving grocery money in a coffee tin behind the refrigerator. I found it once, exactly $62. She told me it was for emergencies, but the emergency came in the form of my father finding it first. He laughed when she cried, told her she should trust him, that he'd double it. He came home 2 days later with empty pockets and a story about a lucky hand that turned unlucky. That was my first lesson about hope. It's expensive when you give it to the wrong person. By the time I turned 12, their marriage was a slow-motion explosion. The walls absorbed their arguments like sponges. I learned to sleep through the noise. My mother finally left one night after another lost paycheck and another promise. She didn't say goodbye. I woke up to the sound of the front door clicking shut and an empty chair at breakfast. My father told me she was too weak to handle real life. I knew better. I just didn't have the words yet. He raised me on charm and chaos. On good days, he'd call me his lucky star. On bad ones, he'd say I was the reason life got complicated. I learned early that love from him came with conditions, and silence was the safest answer. I waited for him to change. I waited until waiting felt like dying. At 16, I started working after school at a diner. I kept my tips in an old oatmeal box under the sink. When he found it, he told me I should have trusted him. He spent the money on scratch tickets. When I cried, he said, "You'll thank me one day when we hit it big." I stopped thanking him for anything. College became my escape plan. I won a scholarship to Northwestern, and the night before I left, he stood in the doorway of my room, his face half in shadow. "You'll come back," he said. "You're a Donovan. We always do." He was half right. I came back, but not for him. Northwestern gave me my first taste of quiet, my first real bed, my first full meal in years that wasn't microwaved. I studied computer science and marketing, slept 4 hours a night, and taught myself how to turn data into clarity. I didn't just want to build software. I wanted to build something honest, something that couldn't lie the way people did. I believed if I could design systems that showed truth without distortion, maybe the world would make sense. After graduation, I rented a desk in a co-working space that smelled like ambition and burnt espresso. I didn't have investors or funding, just a laptop that overheated and a dream that wouldn't die. I called it Donovan & Co. because the name sounded solid, professional. I thought I was taking the curse of that name and rewriting it. I didn't realize I was handing him a weapon. The company started small. A logistics startup hired me to optimize their data, then a hospital, then an entire emergency management network. My dashboards made sense of chaos. They gave people a way to see what mattered in real time. Investors came, interviews followed. By 30, I was running one of the fastest-growing analytics firms in Chicago. A self-made prodigy, one magazine called me. They didn't know what the word self-made really costs. Then one morning, an email arrived. The subject line read, "Proud of you, kid." 4 words. No explanation, no apology. Just that. I deleted it. 2 weeks later, flowers arrived at the office with a card. Let me make things right. I ignored them too. But guilt is a soft thing. It doesn't attack, it seeps. When I finally agreed to meet him, it was winter. He showed up in a coat that looked more expensive than mine, his silver hair slicked back, a new watch glinting under the restaurant light. His eyes, though, were the same. Warm, dangerous, full of stories. "You've done well," he said. "Looks like ambition runs in the family." And I should have walked out then. Instead, I stayed. Because a small part of me, the 12-year-old still waiting by the door, wanted to believe him. He played the role perfectly. The repentant father, the man who'd learned his lesson. He cried when he talked about Mom, said he'd been sober for years. He said he'd gone to therapy, worked hard, wanted nothing from me, just a chance to see who I'd become. I told myself forgiveness was maturity, that giving him another chance made me strong. He began showing up at conferences, shaking hands with my investors, telling anyone who would listen, "That's my daughter." People said we looked alike. I hated that they were right. When he asked to sit in on meetings just to observe, I said yes. When he offered to help negotiate contracts, I said fine. I thought I was controlling the situation. In reality, I was being studied. 6 months later, I found out. My CFO, Priya, walked into my office pale as paper, holding a printout. "Did you authorize this transfer?" she asked. "What transfer?" "A new entity, Donovan Group Holdings. Same logo, same address, different owner. Him." I didn't believe her until I saw the filings. My signature at the bottom, forged so precisely that even I hesitated for a second. The company I had built from scratch was being eaten alive from within. When I confronted him, he didn't even pretend to be sorry. "This is family consolidation," he said. "You're still young. The board trusts me. I'm just protecting your creation." "You're stealing it," I whispered. He poured himself a drink, not meeting my eyes. "You think you'd have gotten this far without my name? You built your empire on what I gave you. I'm just taking it back." The next morning, I couldn't log into my email. The servers were locked. The press release went live before I could stop it. The headline read, "The Donovan Group welcomes founder William Donovan to lead global expansion." My name was erased. My access revoked. My face gone from the website. That was the day I stopped being naive. The world didn't end in an explosion. It ended in silence. The kind of silence that comes right before a storm. When the news broke, I didn't scream. I didn't throw anything. I just sat there, frozen, staring at the headline on my laptop like it was written in a language I no longer understood. Donovan Group announces visionary founder returns to lead company into global expansion. Below it, a smiling photo of him, my father, standing in the lobby I'd designed, my team behind him. My company's mission statement quoted beneath his face. There's a kind of grief that doesn't make noise. It just empties you. For weeks, I tried to fight it through the proper channels. Lawyers, emails, meetings with board members who now avoided my calls. They said things like, "Camille, this is a misunderstanding, and he's just formalizing ownership." They all use that word, formalizing, as if theft became less violent when it wore a suit. The investors, people I'd once shared late-night pizza and spreadsheets with, started copying him on every email. Then they stopped replying to me altogether. My access to the system was revoked. The office keycard that once unlocked everything now blinked red. When I finally accepted that the battle was lost, I packed up my things, one small box, my diplomas, a photo of my team, a mug that said, "Built Not Born." As I walked past reception, the new sign had already been installed, the Donovan Group. My father's reflection smiled back at me from the glass. I didn't cry until I reached the street, not because of what I'd lost, but because of how easily it could all be rewritten. For 3 months, I disappeared. Chicago kept spinning without me. I rented a small basement apartment in the South Loop, a windowless cave with peeling paint and a radiator that clanked like it was haunted. I slept late, ate almost nothing, avoided every call. Priya, my CFO, showed up one evening with takeout and fury. "You can't hide forever," she said, dropping a bag of Thai food on my counter. "I'm not hiding," I muttered. "I'm recovering." Same difference. She sat across from me. "You built something once. You can build again." "With what?" I asked. "He owns everything, the servers, the patents, the contracts." "Not your brain," she interrupted. "He can't trademark that." Her words didn't land then, but they planted something. A few days later, Matteo and Ava came by, 2 of my engineers. They told me they'd quit the Donovan Group. "We'd rather build something real than fake success," Matteo said. They set up laptops on my kitchen table, started scribbling on napkins. That night, the idea took shape. A new platform, faster, transparent, incorruptible. No investors, no politics, no fathers. We called it Halo. The first few weeks were brutal. We worked from my basement, the air thick with the smell of dust and determination. I coded until dawn. Priya handled finances from her couch. Matteo ran simulations on servers we rented with borrowed credit cards. We shared instant noodles and the same old playlist, one that started every morning with "It's a long road, but the sunrise belongs to you." We didn't talk about him. We didn't have to. Every keystroke was defiance. Every update was revenge. The city outside didn't know us anymore, but the world has a way of noticing light where darkness used to be. Within 6 months, a local hospital piloted Halo system, a new analytics dashboard that responded to real-time data in emergencies. It worked flawlessly. They signed a full-year contract within a week. Then came 2 more hospitals, then a logistics firm, then the first investor call. A woman named Harriet Cole, a venture capitalist known for backing underdogs, reached out after reading an article about the mysterious ex-CEO quietly building something new. We met in a small cafe. She arrived without entourage, ordered black coffee, and studied me like an equation. "You're the woman who built Donovan & Co., right?" "Was," I corrected. "Still are," she said. "You just don't know it yet." She listened as I told her everything. The betrayal, the rebuild, the code. When I finished, she leaned back and said, "You're a wildfire, Camille. You just need fuel. I'll invest. On one condition. You keep your company private. No outsiders. No boards that can take it away again." It was the easiest yes of my life. 6 months later, Halo went public. Not on the stock exchange, but in the hearts of those who needed it most. Hospitals were using it to save time. Aid organizations used it to coordinate food shipments. Environmental groups tracked wildfires through it. The interface was so intuitive, it felt alive. While my father went on CNBC still smiling under the title founder of the Donovan Group, our clients quietly left his system for mine. At first, he didn't notice. Then he did. The lawsuit arrived at 7:42 a.m., delivered by courier, stamped in gold ink, the Donovan Group versus Halo Technologies. He accused me of stealing his intellectual property. My lawyer, Nadia, flipped through the pages and laughed bitterly. "He's accusing you of stealing your own code. That's a new level of irony." But irony doesn't make court battles cheap. He had money, reputation, and a PR machine. I had facts. It wasn't enough at first. The press loved the story of a father-daughter business war. Headlines called it the Donovan Civil War. They painted me as emotional, irrational, a child fighting her father's legacy. It didn't matter that his legacy was built on my stolen work. The world still trusted a man's gray hair over a woman's truth. Then came the break. A journalist named Sienna Cho called me. She'd been investigating corporate fraud for the Atlantic Ledger. She'd found inconsistencies in my father's filings, phantom companies, forged signatures, shell accounts. "I can't publish without proof," she said, "but if you help me, we can burn the mask off him." I gave her what she needed. Every timestamp, every design log, every old email. When her article went live, it exploded. She built it. He branded it. Who really owns a name? It trended for days. Social media turned. Investors pulled out. Even members of his board resigned. My father issued a statement calling me a troubled young woman in need of help. The press didn't buy it this time. For the first time, the world saw the truth. But victory never comes clean. Lawsuits still loomed. He still had connections. I still woke at night from dreams of that tower with his name on it. Nadia pushed the case forward with precision. Each forged document became a nail in his coffin. Each witness deposition stripped away his charm. He tried to settle quietly. I refused. I wanted the truth public. The day of the verdict, the courtroom was packed. My father sat across from me, the same man who once taught me to ride a bike and later taught me how betrayal feels. He looked smaller, older, but his eyes still had that glimmer, the belief that he could talk his way out of anything. When the judge read the decision, all rights and assets restored to Ms. Camille Donovan, full restitution granted, defendant found guilty of forgery and fraud, he didn't move. He just blinked once. Outside, cameras flashed. Reporters shouted questions. I said nothing. Behind me, I heard someone collapse. A commotion. My father, clutching his chest, his body folding in on itself. Paramedics rushed in. For a second, the part of me that was still his daughter wanted to run to him. The part that had survived him stood still. He survived the heart attack. Barely. 2 days later, I visited the hospital. The room smelled of antiseptic and fading pride. He lay hooked to monitors, pale, eyes half open. When he saw me, he smiled weakly. "You win," he whispered. I stood at the foot of the bed. "No," I said quietly. "I survived." His eyes glistened. "You hate me." I thought for a moment. "I don't need to," I said. "That's your punishment." He looked away. "You're still a Donovan," he murmured. I walked to the door. "Not the kind you made." I left the hospital that night and walked until my feet hurt. The city lights blurred through snow and tears I hadn't planned to cry. I wasn't sad for him. I was sad for the little girl who had once believed he'd change. The next morning, I woke up lighter. I brewed coffee, opened my laptop, and logged into Halo's dashboard. 1,000 green nodes lit up on the map. Hospitals, relief centers, people who trusted something I built. It was working. It was alive. It was mine. The weeks after the trial felt like walking through fog, the kind that glows gold at sunrise, beautiful but still hiding what lies ahead. For the first time in years, there were no meetings I had to fight my way into, no calls from lawyers, no crises that carried my father's fingerprints, just silence. And silence, when you've lived too long in chaos, can be terrifying. Halo was thriving beyond anything I dared to dream. The day the verdict came down, our servers crashed, not from failure, but from success. Donations flooded in. Hospitals wanted partnerships. NGOs reached out from Kenya, Brazil, and India, asking to use Halo's network to manage logistics for disaster relief. I watched our real-time map bloom across the world, blue dots flickering into green, then gold. Each one a place where Halo was helping someone breathe easier. I should have felt triumphant. Instead, I felt hollow. Priya noticed it first. "You got your company back," she said one night over wine. "So why do you look like you lost something?" Because I did, I answered. I lost the reason I started fighting. She didn't reply right away. She just leaned back, studying me. Then maybe it's time to stop fighting and start building again. Not against something, but for something. The words stayed with me long after she left. A few weeks later, Halo hosted its first global summit, a 3-day conference in Chicago filled with scientists, engineers, and dreamers who believed in what we were building. Standing backstage, I could hear the low hum of hundreds of voices, a sound like human electricity. When they called my name, I walked out to a standing ovation that felt both surreal and undeserved. I took a deep breath, stepped up to the microphone, and looked out over the crowd. 3 years ago, I began, I lost everything I thought defined me. My company, my reputation, my sense of safety. But what I learned since then is that the things we build out of love survive what's built out of ego. A hush fell over the audience. Halo was born from loss, I continued, but it lives because of connection, people refusing to look away from each other's needs. My father taught me to chase power. My team taught me to share it. And if I have one wish for this company's future, it's that it outgrows me, that it belongs to everyone who believes integrity is worth more than control. When I stepped off stage, Harriet Cole, our first investor, caught my arm. You sound like someone who finally knows where she's going. Maybe for the first time, I said. She smiled. Good, because I'm nominating you for the Global Impact Innovator Award. You'll hate the publicity, but the world needs to hear your story. I did hate the publicity, but she was right. The story wasn't just mine anymore. It belonged to everyone who'd ever been underestimated, silenced, or rewritten. A few months later, Halo's logo, a simple circle of light, appeared on news feeds across the world. The awards ceremony took place in Geneva, surrounded by world leaders and entrepreneurs who all spoke the same language: impact, vision, legacy. When my name was announced, the applause echoed like a second heartbeat. As I walked onto the stage to accept the award, I saw him, my father, sitting near the back, thin, frail, leaning on a cane. The same sharp eyes, dulled now by exhaustion. He looked out of place in the crowd, the only person who didn't clap. My hands trembled as I accepted the trophy. For a second, I considered walking straight past him, but something heavier pulled me toward that final unfinished conversation. After the ceremony, I found him in the corridor, alone, staring at a framed photograph of the Alps. When he turned, his voice was soft. "You've done well," he said. I studied him, the man who had once been larger than life, now smaller than the space around him. "Why are you here?" He shrugged. "Wanted to see if I'd built anything worth being proud of." "You didn't build this," I said quietly. He smiled faintly. "No, but you did, and maybe that's enough." There was no apology, no sudden redemption, just truth, stripped bare and tired. "I'm dying," he added after a pause. "Liver failure. The doctor says months, maybe weeks." The words hit harder than I expected, not because I feared losing him, but because part of me realized I already had, years ago. He reached into his coat and handed me an envelope. "It's not money," he said, "just words." I hesitated, then took it. "I know you'll hate me till the end," he said, "but maybe one day you'll remember that I tried, in my broken way, to make you strong." And then he left, leaning on his cane, swallowed by the crowd. That night, I couldn't sleep. The envelope sat on my bedside table like a ticking clock. Just before dawn, I opened it. Inside was a single handwritten letter. "Camille, if you're reading this, I'm probably gone, or close to it. I've spent my life chasing luck, mistaking it for purpose. You were the one thing I did right, and I ruined even that. But maybe your strength came from surviving me. Maybe that's how love hides itself sometimes, in the lessons we wish we didn't have to learn. Don't waste your life hating me. I already did enough of that for both of us. Take what you built and make it matter. Dad. I sat there in the half-light, the paper trembling in my hands. I didn't cry. I didn't forgive him either, but I felt something else. Release. Like finally setting down a stone I didn't realize I'd been carrying. 2 months later, the news came quietly. William Donovan, 62, passed away at St. Mary's Hospital. The obituaries called him a controversial entrepreneur. None of them mentioned me. I didn't attend the funeral. Instead, I drove to the lake just outside the city, the place where I used to think all roads ended. The sky was pale blue, the water cold and alive. I tore the letter into small pieces and let the wind carry them out over the surface. Goodbye, I whispered, not to him, but to the part of myself that still needed his approval. In the months that followed, Halo's growth accelerated. We expanded into 20 countries, partnered with the United Nations for crisis data analysis, and launched an open-source initiative to help students and researchers build their own systems for public good. But what mattered most weren't the numbers or the partnerships. It was the people. A young woman in Nairobi who built a disaster alert system using Halo's code. A single father in Detroit who used our analytics to secure funding for a food bank. A teenager in Argentina who wrote to me saying, "Your story made me stop apologizing for dreaming." Every message reminded me that creation heals what destruction can't. One spring morning, I returned to that same tower, the one that had once carried my father's name. The gold letters were still there, glinting in the sun. But this time, I didn't feel anger, just clarity. I walked into the lobby where a new receptionist looked up in surprise. "Good morning, Ms. Donovan. Can I help you?" "I just wanted to see it one last time," I said. The elevator ride to the top felt like traveling through memories. Every floor a year of my life, every chime another version of myself passing by. When I stepped onto the top floor, the office was empty, the furniture covered in white sheets, the air still. The company had gone bankrupt months after the lawsuit. The empire he'd stolen had collapsed under the weight of its lies. I walked to the window. The skyline stretched out, endless. Then I did something I'd waited years to do. I reached into my bag, took out a small gold key, the key to Halo's new headquarters, built across the river. I placed it on the window ledge and whispered, "This chapter's done." That night, Halo hosted its 5th anniversary gala, a celebration not of wealth, but of impact. The hall was filled with laughter, clinking glasses, the sound of possibility. I stood on stage once more, under soft white lights, surrounded by people who had turned my survival story into a movement. I used to think legacy was about buildings, titles, or the name on a tower, I told the crowd. But real legacy is quieter. It's the ripple you leave behind when you choose courage over comfort. It's every life that touches another because you refuse to stay silent. The applause was thunderous. But what moved me wasn't the sound. It was the sight of hundreds of faces illuminated by light, each one a reminder that even from ashes, something beautiful can grow. It's strange how time softens the edges of pain. By the fall of 2025, Chicago no longer felt like the city that broke me. It felt like the city that rebuilt me. The air was cooler now, crisp with the scent of leaves and possibility. From my office window, the skyline shimmered in amber light, each building a monument to resilience, not power. The tower that once bore my father's name stood empty across the river. A developer had bought it to turn into housing for low-income families. The irony wasn't lost on me. Something selfish was finally becoming shelter for others. I visited it one last time before construction began. The gold letters had been taken down. The bare facade looked cleaner, almost free. I pressed my palm against the glass, cold, silent, and whispered, "Rest." Then I walked away without looking back. Life after revenge is quieter than people expect. For months, I woke up each day waiting for the next battle, another lawsuit, another rumor, another ghost. But they never came. The stillness felt foreign at first, like standing in a room where the noise had suddenly stopped. Eventually, it became comforting. Halo had grown into something far beyond what I imagined. By 2025, our technology powered relief systems in 32 countries. Our team had doubled, then tripled. We partnered with the World Health Organization to manage vaccine logistics and worked with small communities to track missing children after disasters. But what I was most proud of wasn't the reach. It was the reason. Halo wasn't built for profit anymore. It was built for people. And maybe that's why it thrived. Priya and I became closer than I ever thought possible. We'd shared war, loss, and triumph. Now we shared laughter, real, unguarded laughter. She married Matteo that summer. I gave the toast at their wedding, standing under a canopy of light strung between oak trees, telling stories of sleepless nights and bad code that somehow built miracles. None of us would be here without Camille, Priya said, tears glimmering in her eyes. I shook my head. We'd all be here anyway, I replied. Just maybe, in different shapes. Halo was never mine alone. It was ours. The guests cheered. Fireflies drifted above the lawn like tiny lanterns. It felt like peace. Fragile, glowing, real. A few months later, I received an email from an unfamiliar sender, Camille Donovan. The subject line read, "Your father's will." I stared at it for a long time before opening it. Inside was a short message from a lawyer in Arizona. My father had left behind a small storage unit in his name. The only instruction in his will was that its contents be given to me. For a week, I ignored it. I told myself I was done looking backward. But one rainy afternoon, curiosity outweighed closure. I booked a flight. The unit was in a quiet suburb outside Phoenix, a row of metal doors baking under the desert sun. The manager led me down the corridor and handed me a key. "Hasn't been opened in over a year," he said. "Guess it's yours now." When the lock clicked open, dust spilled into the air like memory. Inside were only 3 things: a box of old photographs, a folded leather jacket, and a broken wristwatch. The photographs were mostly of me: baby pictures, school portraits, newspaper clippings, some I'd never seen before. On the back of one, in his messy handwriting, he'd scrawled, "My reason to try again." The watch was stopped at 3:47, its glass cracked. I remembered it. He used to tap it when he was lying. "Running late," he'd say, when he wasn't coming home at all. I held it in my palm for a moment, then set it back down. There were no grand revelations in that storage unit. No apologies carved in gold, just relics of a man who couldn't fix what he'd broken, but maybe had tried in small, imperfect ways. And somehow, that was enough. When I returned to Chicago, I started writing again. Something I hadn't done since college. Not code, words, thoughts that had been waiting to find their way out. At night, I'd sit by my window, typing softly while the city glowed below. I wrote about failure, forgiveness, the inheritance of pain, and the choice to end it. I didn't plan to publish any of it, but Harriet read a few pages and said, "You don't realize it yet, but this is your second company, one that trades in truth instead of data." She was right. A year later, the essays became a book. The title came easily, "The Light That Stayed." It wasn't about my father, or even Halo. It was about the quiet miracle of surviving the fire without letting it harden you. The book became unexpectedly popular, especially among women entrepreneurs. I received letters from people who'd lost everything and rebuilt anyway. One woman wrote, "You gave me permission to start over at 52. Another said, "I used to think revenge was power. Now I see it's peace." Reading them, I realized something I hadn't before. Every time we tell the truth, we give someone else permission to heal. On Christmas Eve 2025, I visited the lake again, the same place where I'd scattered my father's letter 2 years earlier. Snow fell softly over the water, turning the world white and still. I brought with me a small lantern, the kind used in old lighthouses. I set it on the shore, lit the wick, and watched the flame flicker in the wind. He'd taught me darkness. Vivian, My mentor, my silent protector, had taught me structure, but the world, this wild, beautiful, unpredictable world, had taught me light, and light was what I chose to keep. When I got home that night, my phone buzzed, a message from a number labeled unknown. "Your father used to talk about you, you know. I was his nurse. He said the only good thing he ever did was raise someone strong enough to forgive him, even if she never said it out loud." I stared at the screen for a long time, then typed a reply. Tell him he was wrong about many things, but not about that. And then I turned off the phone. The next morning, Christmas morning, I woke to sunlight pouring through the curtains. Snow still dusted the city rooftops. The church bells rang from across the street. In the kitchen, I made coffee, opened the curtains, and stood watching people pass by below. Families laughing, children running, the city alive with warmth. I realized something simple, something quiet. I no longer felt alone. Not because of who was in my life, but because of what I'd become. Someone who no longer measured love by its permanence, but by its honesty. Later that week, I returned to Halo headquarters, our new building on the river, all glass and light, shaped like a circle. In the lobby hung a plaque engraved with the words, "Integrity outlives ambition." Every time I passed it, I thought of the girl who once built a company to prove her worth to a man who'd forgotten hers. She didn't exist anymore. The woman walking these halls now built for different reasons, to create, to serve, to give back what she'd been given. As I walked through the offices, my team greeted me with warmth and laughter. Priya waved from her glass-walled office, pregnant now, glowing. Matteo carried blueprints under his arm. "Hey, boss," he called out. "We're naming the new AI module after you." I smiled. "Then make sure she learns how to forgive." They laughed, not knowing how serious I was. That evening, I stood on the rooftop terrace as the sun dipped below the skyline. The glass towers shimmered gold, reflections rippling across the river. The wind carried the hum of the city, alive, imperfect, endlessly beginning again. I closed my eyes and whispered a quiet prayer, not to any god in particular, but to the universe itself. Thank you for taking everything that broke me and teaching me to build something better from it. When I opened my eyes, the city lights blinked back, a constellation of new beginnings.